The House will be in order. The chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., March 18, 2022. I hereby appoint the Honorable Gwen Moore to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
The prayer this morning will be offered by Chaplain Kibben.
Would you pray with me? Fair and merciful God, you love the just, and you will not forsake the faithful. Inspired and encouraged by your love, may we turn from our inclination to serve ourselves, to disadvantage others, and to do what is good in your eyes and honorable in your sight. The mouths of the righteous utter wisdom, and their tongues speak with equity. Lord of our lives, guard and guide our speech today, that it would reflect your goodness and uphold your justice. May our decisions align with your law, and our feet never step from your path. For our hope is in you. Even as the wicked lie in wait to pounce on the innocent, even as their intentions are set on destroying those who wish only to live in peace and security, you, O Lord, will not leave or forsake them. Make firm the steps of those who delight in you, whose hearts are pure. Lift up those who stumble, and uphold those who share generously your gift of grace. We offer our prayer in the strength of your name. Amen.
Amen. Pursuant to Section 11A of House Resolution 188, the Journal of the Last Day's Proceedings is approved. The Pledge of Allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Adderholt.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair will entertain up to 5 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Texas seek recognition? The gentlelady is recognized. Without objection,
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to recognize the 90th anniversary of a Houston area community staple, the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. Anyone who lives in and around Houston knows about the Houston Rodeo, but outside of their legendary fried Oreos, incredibly tasty brisket, and impressive livestock show and rodeo, it's a family-friendly place where neighbors and communities across the region learn about agriculture. The Houston Rodeo has a special place in my heart, Madam Speaker, as it does to many Texans. Growing up on a farm, I still remember my first trip to Houston was to attend the Houston Rodeo. Today, it's the world's largest rodeo with attendance surpassing 2 million people. Money raised at the rodeo goes to scholarships. This year alone, 350 four-year scholarships will be awarded. This is a Houston gem. It's a Texas gem. The Houston Rodeo, congratulations for 90 years, and we look forward to the next 90. I yield back, Madam Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
To ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Objection. The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. U.S. Customs and Border Patrol information confirms what we know. The Biden border crisis is getting worse. There were 164,000 illegal alien encounters in February of this year, up 63% from February 2021. You know what else is up? Fentanyl seizures. Also, what's up is illegal aliens with criminal backgrounds. What's down is deportations. When we're seeing record increases in people coming across our border illegally, deportations are down. What else is down is morale of Customs and Border Patrol agents. I know this because I traveled with them on a ride-along, and they told me that it's down because the current administration is making them out to be the bad guys. That's their words. We need to support our Customs and Border Patrol agents to secure our southern border. We need to give them the tools they need to do their job. It's time for the President of the United States to make sure he does his job and keeps America safe and secures our southern border. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Illinois seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlelady from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, vulnerabilities that have existed in our domestic supply chains for years were put to the test. The vulnerabilities of our supply chain resulted in consumers being faced with empty shelves at stores and small businesses struggling to reach consumers. We must act now to restore our supply chain and ensure that our economy is prepared for the next crisis. The House took the first step in passing the America Competes Act. As the House and Senate resolve differences, we must include the supply chain provisions in the final House bill so we can repair these supply chain vulnerabilities. The supply chain provisions included in the Supply Chain Act, which I led with Reps. Bordeaux and Kinzinger, we need an Office of Supply Chain Resilience and Crisis Response at the Department of Commerce to monitor critical supply chains and encourage partnerships between the federal government and industry. It's time to repair our supply chains and protect our economy. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman from Alabama is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise this morning to recognize the 6 teams from Alabama's 4th Congressional District who recently won the state titles in high school basketball. There were a total of 14 that were up for grabs, and schools from the 4th Congressional District, which I have the privilege to represent, won almost half of them. In the girls' finals, Marion County High, located in Ewan, coached by Scott Ville, won the state title 1A. Deshler High School, located in Tuscumbia, and coached by Jana Killen, won the state 4A title. And Gunnersville High School, located in Gunnersville and coached by Kenny Hill, won the state 5A championship. Over on the boys' side, Covenant Christian, located in Tuscumbia and coached by Brett Waldrop, won the 1A title. Plainview High School, located in Rainsville and coached by Robbie Coker, won the state 3A championship. Coleman High School, located in Coleman and coached by Stu Studeman, won the state 6A title. I congratulate all of these teams, all their schools, and all their communities. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise today to honor the life and legacy
The
of
gentleman, is the gentleman seeking recognition?
I seek recognition to address the floor for 1 minute.
Okay, without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to honor the life and legacy of Iram Maristani, an East Harlem Afro-Boricua photographer whose work is an ode to the beloved neighborhood of El Barrio and the Latino community as a whole. Iram was the official photographer and member of the Young Lords, a Puerto Rican activist group inspired by the Black Panthers and a lifelong resident of El Barrio. He helped found El Museo del Barrio in 1969, curating the institution's visual language department in its early years, and later on serving as its director from 1974 to 1977. Iram was always giving back to his community in East Harlem, serving as a mentor to young people and as a photographer who understood the importance of self-preservation and the power of images. He knew that his photos were political, representing El Barrio from the perspective of our residents filled with love and pride. Dignidad over fame, that was his motto. I am thankful our community lived to see his work and our people showcased with respect and dignity. May his memory and his art live on to inspire all of us. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to recognize a good friend of mine, Mr. Danny Powers, on his selection to serve as the Grand Marshal of Savannah, Georgia's 198th St. Patrick's Day Parade. The St. Patrick's Day Parade in Savannah is the third largest St. Patrick's Day celebration in the entire country. We will be expecting around 400,000 spectators to attend Savannah's signature event. Since 1824, Savannah has been the home of this fabulous celebration of the rich Irish heritage of our city. The Grand Marshal is an honor that recognizes members of our community for their great service, and Danny is well deserving of that. Danny has been the Chatham County Tax Commissioner for 27 years, since 1995. During his tenure, he has boosted property tax collection rates, integrated online technology to improve accessibility, and has added satellite offices for vehicle tag renewals. He has been an integral and influential member of the Savannah community for many years, and we are so grateful to have him. Congratulations on this tremendous honor, Danny. Congratulations, my friend. You've earned it. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Missouri seek recognition?
I seek recognition to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlelady from Missouri is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. St. Louis and I rise today in honor of a beloved member of our community. Cora Faith Walker was truly a one-of-a-kind leader. She constantly found innovative ways to advocate for those in our communities who had the most need. No matter the role she was called to serve in, Cora was unwavering in her commitment to uplifting those around her. Above all else, she always stood for what's right, for herself, for her loved ones, for her neighbors, for St. Louis and for Missouri. Her warmth and genuine spirit translated seamlessly to her legislative leadership, and she relentlessly advocated for at-risk women, children, and families. She has left an indelible mark on me and on our district. Though we deeply mourn this painful, untimely loss, St. Louis and I celebrate her beautiful life. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to honor the Hermantown boys hockey team, the 2022 Class A Minnesota State hockey champions. Minnesota is the state of hockey, and in northern Minnesota, hockey is not just a proud tradition of ours. For the players, coaches, and families and fans, it is truly a way of life. It brings me great joy to see these athletes represent some of the best parts of our great 8th district as our state champions. This group of hardworking young players has shown what dedication, passion, and unwavering commitment can accomplish. It is a true example of American exceptionalism. I would also like to honor the coaches for being outstanding role models and leaders to the Hawks this entire season. Head coach Pat Andrews and assistant coaches Nate Buck, Matt Swanson, and Chad Huddle guided the team to not only the school's 4th state championship, but also a winning season concluding with 29 wins with only 2 losses. The Hawks secured the championship with an exciting 3-2 win over Warroad. Congratulations to every player, coach, and fan who lifted the Hermantown Hawks to victory. You've made our district so proud, and I wish every team member the best as they continue their hockey careers. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
Who seeks recognition? For what purpose does the gentlelady from Iowa seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentlelady from Iowa is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to recognize some incredible students from Iowa's 2nd District. On Saturday, March 12th, the Central DeWitt Special Olympics basketball team earned a silver medal, and the Sabres United Dance team earned a gold medal at the Midwinter Tournament in Iowa City. For the last few years, the Special Olympics Iowa has put on the Midwinter Tournament as part of their ongoing series of events to showcase the amazing skills and talents of our athletes. The Midwinter Tournament sees competition in basketball, basketball skills, cheerleading, gymnastics, and powerlifting. Healthy athlete screenings are also provided to athletes by healthcare professionals for dental, hearing, overall health and fitness, and more. Organizations like the Special Olympics strive to create a better world by fostering the acceptance and inclusion of all people. Through the power of sports, these athletes discover new strengths, skills, confidence, abilities, fulfillment, and success. They also learn the values of hard work, sportsmanship, perseverance, teamwork, and most importantly, having fun. Special Olympics has changed the lives of so many amazing athletes, and I'm proud to have them in Iowa. But I'm even prouder of the awesome athletes from Central DeWitt who are already making their mark on the world. Go Sabres. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back my time.
What purpose does the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 979, I call up H.R. 2116, the Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair Act of 2022, or the Crown Act of 2022, and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 182, H.R. 2116, a bill to prohibit discrimination based on an individual's texture or style of hair.
Pursuant to House Resolution 979, in lieu of the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on the Judiciary, printed in the bill, an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 117-36 is adopted, and the bill as amended is considered as read. The bill, as amended, shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Judiciary on their respective designees. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, and the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous material on H.R. 2116.
Without objection, so ordered.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, the Creating a Respectful and Open World for a Natural Hair Act, or the Crown Act, is a critically important civil rights bill that would explicitly prohibit discrimination on the basis of hair texture or hairstyles commonly associated with a particular race or national origin. It would do so in areas of the law where discrimination on the basis of race or national origin is already prohibited, such as employment, education, and housing. Although Republicans blocked passage of this bill a few weeks ago, their arguments have just as little merit now as they did then. That is why we're here again to advance this important legislation. Among the arguments that we heard previously was that this bill was not needed because the law already protects people from hair-based discrimination. While I agree that existing civil rights statutes, if properly read, already make such discrimination unlawful, several federal courts have erroneously rejected this interpretation, leaving the state of the law unclear at best. Far from being duplicative, this legislation is absolutely essential to remove any ambiguity from the law and to fix these courts' misinterpretation of federal civil rights laws. Republicans also argue that this legislation could somehow undermine the ability of employers to maintain workplace safety standards. But nothing could be further from the truth. This bill does nothing to prohibit employers from addressing safety concerns, and the long-standing provisions under the civil rights laws that enable employers to ensure workplace safety would remain firmly in place. Since neither of these arguments holds up to scrutiny, It's important to step back and understand why the Crown Act is so urgently needed. According to a 2019 study conducted by the Joy Collective, Black people are, quote, disproportionately burdened by policies and practices in public places, including the workplace, that target, profile, or single them out for natural hairstyles, close quote, and other hairstyles traditionally associated with their race, like braids, locks, and twists. This has real consequences for real people. Students have been sent home from school or told they could not walk at graduation. Employees have been told to change their hair because it violated their employer's dress code. Some people have even been denied jobs altogether because of their hairstyles. In view of these disturbing facts, 14 states have enacted statutes prohibiting discrimination on the basis of an individual's natural hairstyle. In every case with bipartisan support, and sometimes even with the unanimous support of both parties. I am disappointed that we did not see such bipartisan support when we brought this bill up a few weeks ago, but my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have another chance today to do the right thing. This is a matter of basic justice that demands a national solution by Congress. That's why I strongly support the Crown Act and urge all my colleagues, including my Republican colleagues, to do so as well. I thank the gentlewoman from New Jersey, Representative Bonnie Watson-Coleman, for her leadership and for introducing this important bill to this Congress. I urge all members to support this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. A gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Joe Biden inherited a relatively stable and calm world, and in 14 months, we have complete chaos. Internationally, think about last summer. Think about that video last summer where you had people trying to jump on the wheel of the plane as it was taking off in Afghanistan. That situation there where the debacle that was the exit from Afghanistan. Think about what's going on in Ukraine today. Here at home, in 14 months, we went from a secure border to complete chaos. Over 2 million illegal immigrants coming in this country in 1 year. We went from relatively safe streets to record levels of crime in every major urban area in the country. We went from stable prices to record high inflation, 40-year high inflation. And of course, we went from energy independence to $5 gas, and the President of the United States begging Iran and Venezuela to increase production. In 14 months, from stability to chaos. And today, what are the Democrats bringing to the floor? A bill that is titled Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair Act of 2021. That's what we're focused on today. How about a world where gas prices aren't $5 a gallon? How about a world where you can actually walk safely on your streets and not have record levels of crime? How about a world where inflation isn't at a 40-year high? How about a world where we were actually energy independent? Those are the issues we should be focused on. But Democrats today, Friday, March 18th, 2022, with chaos all over the place, this is what they're focused on. This is what they're focused on. Madam Speaker, I would hope, and as the chairman of the Judiciary Committee just said, we have the civil rights law cover this thing, to cover this any kind of discrimination here. It's covered. It's wrong if it happens, but this is what the Democrats are focused on. 14 months of chaos, and we're doing a bill on hair. I think the American people expect more from their Congress, expect more from their elected representatives, and I hope that we can actually focus on the things that matter to the American people. With that, I reserve the balance of our time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York. Mr. Nadler is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I said that this was covered by the law, but several federal circuit courts disagree, and therefore it's not covered in those circuits, and that's why we need this bill. I now yield 4 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from New Jersey, the sponsor of the bill, Ms. Watson-Coleman.
I want to thank thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentlelady from New Jersey, the author of the bill, is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I guess my desire to move on with this is just overcoming my recognition of the decorum, and I thank you for being patient with me. And I thank the gentleman who is the chairman of our Judiciary Committee for recognizing me. And I really do wish we could concentrate on other issues as well, and I think that we are. And I think that the creation of 6.5 million jobs, of unity around the world, of restoring dignity and respect among our people, trying to put our attention onto things as important as Build Back Better and taking care of the economy, recognizes that Joe Biden, this administration, this Democratic majority in the House of Representatives can chew gum and walk at the same time. And if my colleagues don't think this is worthy of a debate, then they should have gone on and done what they did 2 years ago and vote on the bill a couple of weeks ago. But here we are today. Here we are today standing on behalf of those individuals, whether my colleagues on the other side recognize it or not, are discriminated against as children in school, as adults who are trying to get jobs, of individuals who are trying to get housing, of individuals who simply want access to affordable, public accommodations, and to be beneficiaries of federally funded programs. And why are they denied these opportunities? Because there are folks in this society who get to make those decisions who think because your hair is kinky, it is braided, it is in knots, or it is not straight and blonde and light brown, that you somehow are not worthy of access to those issues. Well, that's discrimination. There is no logical reason that anyone should be discriminated against on any level because of the texture of their hair or the style of their hair. Now, I understand that my colleagues on the Republican side don't get the vast array of discriminatory practices because they spend so much time trying to perpetuate an all-white society here in the most diverse country in the world. But nonetheless, this bill is vitally important. It is important to the young girls and the young boys who have to cut their hair in the middle of a wrestling match in front of everyone because some white referee says that your hair is inappropriate to engage in your match. That young man engaged in his match and he won it. It's inappropriate for our girls to be sent home disciplined or pushed out simply because they've got braids in their hair. And it doggone sure is discriminatory to deny someone employment, housing, or public accommodations because of the way they're wearing their hair. That's why we're standing here today. It is unfortunate that we have to, but we do. And with that in mind, I thank the chairman of the Judiciary Committee for giving me this opportunity to speak on behalf of a bill that I think is vitally important, that represents movement and understanding in the 21st century what discrimination can look like and what it can do to people. And I urge all of my colleagues, including those on the Republican side that voted for it a couple of weeks ago, that they will do so today. And with that, I thank you and I yield back.
Minutes remaining. Does the gentleman reserve?
Reserve.
Okay. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman has 27 and a half minutes, and he reserves. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from Missouri, a member of the Judiciary Committee, Ms. Bush.
Gentlelady from Missouri is recognized for 2 minutes.
Madam Speaker, St. Louis and I rise today in support of the Crown Act. As a black woman who loves my braids, I know what it's like to feel isolated because of how I wear my hair. This is the last time we say no more to black people being demeaned and discriminated against for the same hairstyles that corporations profit from. No more to Black people being made to feel like we have to cut our locks just to get a job. This is the last time we say no more to Black people being made to feel like we have to straighten our hair to be deemed professional. No more to Black children being suspended from school because their hair doesn't align with their school's dress code. This is actually a thing, and we are American, and we stand up and we say no more for the last time. We are American. Black hair is not to be policed. I commend my colleagues for their work on the Crown Act, and I urge my colleagues to support it. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized. Gentleman from Ohio reserves. Gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished Majority Leader of the House, Representative Hoyer.
The Majority Leader, the gentleman from Maryland, is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. We're going to talk about hair, but this bill is about discrimination. This bill is about equality. This bill is about individual integrity. That's what this bill is about. Madam Speaker, I rise in strong support of this bill, and I thank my friend from New Jersey, Representative Watson Coleman, for putting it forward. This bill, as I just said, is not about hair. It is about hair, of course, but it's about the reaction, the inequality, the discrimination, you're not welcome here if your hair texture is different and you have to or want to fix it in a certain way. It's about the ability of every person in our country to have access to education, to economic advancement, and to opportunities to get ahead. This is an issue of civil rights. The legislation before us would prohibit discrimination based on a person's hair texture or hairstyle, if that style or texture is commonly associated with a particular race or national origin. My hair is different than Barbara Lee, who's standing next to me. Neither one of us had anything to do with that. I had no way to have the texture of my hair any way other than my genetic makeup was, nor did Barbara Lee. Why, therefore, should there be any thought that anybody would be able to discriminate on that basis? Too often, styles such as locks, cornrows, twists, braids, bantu knots, and afros are wrongly perceived as unkempt or unprofessional. In fact, for many of these styles are not only central to one's culture and heritage, but also based upon convenience, based upon a way to have an easier time. For a long time, and still today, expectations about what hairstyles are considered appropriate or professional, as the previous speaker said, have created immense pressure to conform to a beauty standard of straight hair that requires considerable time, effort, and cost. This burden falls disproportionately on Black Americans, particularly Black women and girls. At the same time, enforcing this standard sends a terrible message to young people about their belonging in society and can harm their very self-esteem. A survey commissioned by the Dove Company found that Black women were 80% more likely to change their natural hair to fit into an office setting and 1.5 times more likely to be sent home from the workplace due to their hair than non-Black women. For children and teenagers in school, spending time conforming their hair to a different standard takes away from their time spent doing homework or getting enough sleep. I hope I never get so old that I don't remember that I really cared about, did I look like the other kid in school? Or did I look different? Was there something, I happen to have been really skinny as a kid. I'm not too fat right now, but I was really skinny as a kid. And I was really self-conscious about that. And when you're a kid, being self-conscious is really painful. And you feel put off if somehow you're different. For children and teenagers in school, spending time conforming their hair to different standard takes away from time spent doing homework or getting enough sleep. But much more importantly, their psychological well-being. This legislation recognized that natural hair, none of us made our nature. It was made for us. Should not be a cause for discrimination or denial of opportunities. It would treat this discrimination in the same way as we already treat discrimination based on race. Nobody decides the color of their skin. It is who you are. It is what you have. And as Martin Luther King told us, it's really irrelevant. The content of character is what's, not the hue of skin, but how I treat others and how do others treat me. That's what we meant by all men and women are created equal. They're not created the same. We're different. But it is the character and conduct that ought to govern how we are accepted and treated. This is similar to the Title VI and Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of '64, the Fair Housing Act, and other civil rights laws. Nationwide protection is necessary so that no one is denied the simple dignity of being one's authentic self in America, while having access to all opportunities this country offers. Character and conduct. Our military took steps to end hair discrimination last year. If anybody thinks this isn't a real issue, obviously the military thought it was an issue, and it was an important enough issue, they took action. And the House passed this legislation in 2020 with bipartisan support. Frankly, it is disappointing that 188 Republicans opposed this legislation last week when we brought it to the floor under an expedited process, under suspension. This should be something that all of us as Americans, as people who honor the Declaration of Independence, and that statement that reverberated around the world of a very central premise that is America. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all, and we said men because we were limited in our thought pattern at that point in time, but as we've grown, we've expanded it. Men and women of all different types and colors, and yes, sexual orientation, are equal. Not the same, but deserving because God has given them, God has created them, deserving of our respect and our equal treatment. I'm bringing this bill back to the floor, Madam Speaker, under rules so that we can pass it with bipartisan support today. And I think it will be bipartisan. This really ought to have been unanimous support, since it's about fairness and non-discrimination. I know that some people say, oh, this is going to cause some people a problem because somebody was going to claim you violated my rights. Yes, that's America. That's why the Constitution says you have the right to redress of grievances. Yes, it may have some court, but you can get around it really quickly. Don't discriminate. Treat people based upon their conduct and character. We must act to ensure that everyone can get a job, succeed in school or at work, find housing, and attain economic security without facing discrimination simply because of their hair. Again, I want to thank my friend Bonnie Watson Coleman for her leadership on this bill, and I urge my colleagues to make America a little fairer, a little more hewing to that basic premise of which I just spoke. Let's pass this bill. Let's make America a little more American. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The majority leader just said that the bill is not about hair, the bill is about discrimination. I would say he's wrong on both counts, because disparate treatment cannot be based on race, color, or natural origin. That's already the law. That's constitutional. So he's wrong on that statement. And the bill is definitely about hair. Here's the title of the bill: Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. So he's wrong on both counts. So the bill's about hair. What the bill's not about is dealing with the crazy energy situation we find ourselves in today. The bill's not about opening up ANWR. The bill's not about increasing domestic production of energy so we don't have $5 gas. The bill is not about dealing with the inflation problem, the 40-year high inflation problem that this country faces, the problem that's impacting moms and dads and families across this country every single day. The bill's not about that. It's definitely about hair. It is not about that. Not about dealing with the border situation. 165,000 illegal encounters on the border last month alone. It's not about that. Not about that. The majority leader was wrong when he said this bill was not about hair. That's all it's about. I would yield as much time as the gentleman from North Carolina, my friend and a member of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Bishop, as much time as he wants to use.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To Mr. Jordan's point, we're beset with problems. Two of the most significant are that the producer price index is at 10%. We face a cost environment that is unsustainable and that affects every American's livelihood every time they visit a gas pump or go to the store. We face an employment environment where Americans have been disincentivized to work. Every time I speak to people in my district, well, maybe different in the last couple of weeks in the latest catastrophes we've seen, but certainly until then, the leading concern is the availability of people who are inclined to work in order to fulfill job opportunities. The Judiciary Committee's report on this legislation points out that I and Representative Cliff Bentz from Oregon raised the question about this legislation in the markup that it may prevent employers from regulating hairstyles for workplace safety reasons. If one of the cases involved, I believe, was about long dreadlocks that could become ensnared in machinery on a workplace floor. Let me tell you what the Judiciary Committee's report by the majority says is the answer to that problem. They say that concern is misplaced because under the long-standing burden-shifting scheme applied by courts in Title VII cases, an employer may defeat a discrimination claim by asserting that workplace safety was a legitimate, non-discriminatory reason for taking an adverse employment action against an employee, with the burden then shifting to the employee to prove that the asserted reason was a pretext for discrimination. Assuming the employee cannot demonstrate that the employer's assertion of workplace safety was pretextual, the employer would prevail against an employment discrimination claim. How extraordinarily comforting. So if the employee wants to wear dreadlocks, and an employer is legitimately concerned for the health and safety of the employee that his scalp might be ripped off by a machine, then the employer can enter into the litigation. And it certainly couldn't be arbitrated. We took care of that yesterday, right on the floor of the House. We got to have litigation. We'll have expensive lawyers. We'll get the complaint filed, the answer filed. Maybe there'll be a motion to dismiss that'll be denied. We'll get into the discovery process. We'll send out the interrogatories and the document requests. We'll ask for the other occasions where somebody's been fired, examine the process and the practices of the employer for the last decade. We'll get some experts in. We've got to have some experts to come in and testify the likelihood that the long dreadlocks are going to get caught in the machinery. We'll have conflicting experts, each on each side. They'll disagree. And then the court will receive a motion for summary judgment. Say, is there enough evidence to submit the case to trial? And the judge will have a 130-page opinion that'll examine the burden-shifting scheme and the initial burden and then the response burden, and the burden shifts to the employee to show pretext, and the inflation rate creeps higher, and the folks willing to enter into jobs seem to be less and less, and the catastrophes keep coming. But this is the top priority. I don't think we need to drive lawsuits between Americans. I think in the main, Americans well understand the rules of the road. As the Judiciary Committee itself reports, courts have generally even recognized that hairstyle, to the extent it's associated with race, as a basis for decisions on employment or the like, is already unlawful. The EEOC's own manual says that discriminating on the basis of, for example, afros is unlawful. Another solution to a problem that doesn't exist in any significant scope in this country, and the result being inflation that gets higher, more supply constriction that drives inflation higher, more animosity and obstacles between employees and employers, between merchants and customers, to drive more lawsuits, to pay more lawyers, to make the quality of life in America so much better. That's where we are. That's where we are today on the floor of the House. I yield back.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I would point out again, because some of my Republican colleagues seem not to hear it, that this is the law, as they say, but that several circuit courts say it isn't the law. So all this bill is doing is reaffirming what the law is, despite several circuit courts. And we see that the law in those states where the circuit courts have upheld it properly has not resulted in any of the catastrophes we just heard. Madam Speaker, I now yield to...
Yield?
Yes, I will.
Is it not correct, Mr. Chairman, the reason this bill is on the floor is because Republicans voted against a suspension?
Yes.
Which could have easily passed to say we're against discrimination. And because 188 Republicans voted no, this bill needed to come forward. Because, as the chairman has just pointed out, the law is in doubt because courts have taken different positions. I thank the chairman for yielding.
I thank the gentleman. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from California, Ms. Lee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in strong support of H.R. 2116, the Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair Act, commonly known as the Crown Act. And I'd like to thank Speaker Pelosi, Chairman Nadler, and of course, Congresswoman Bonnie Watson-Coleman for bringing this bill to the floor. And let me just first say, we all know, and you've heard the debate, that this bill is going to take aim at prohibiting race-based hair discrimination. But let me just tell the other side, I am an American, and it is very important to me and to millions of Americans. Yet, your arguments, they're outrageous, but they're not surprising that Republicans, every step of the way, try to diminish the humanity of black and brown people, try to uphold white supremacy at every step of the way. Just listen to what you're saying in terms of arguing against this bill. For decades, black and brown people have been penalized for wearing hairstyles, natural hairstyles, deemed as messy, unruly, and unprofessional. We've seen students humiliated and unfairly disciplined because their braided hair extensions or locks were considered a violation of the dress code. In the workplace, black people with curly afros, braids, twists, or locks, or with no hair, are often perceived as less professional than people with straightened hair, which negatively impacts their ability to be promoted or to get raises. And yes, personally, I've always worn my hair however I chose. I've worn it straight, I've worn it braided, I've worn it spiked, I've worn it curly, I've worn it in a big natural, you name it. You name it. Everyone should be able to make those choices without fear of repercussion. Hair discrimination is rooted in systemic racism and is a real barrier to advancement and empowerment for our communities. Now, I've been fighting to end this discriminatory practice for years. In 2014, the women of the Congressional Black Caucus urged the Army to rescind Army Regulation 671, which prohibited many hairstyles worn by African American women and other women of color.
Gentlelady's
And I led an
time
amendment in the
has
fiscal year
expired.
15 Defense Appropriations Bill to ban funding for this discriminatory rule.
Gentlelady will suspend.
May I have another 30 seconds, Mr. Chairman?
I yield the gentlelady another 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to remind you, we put this in the Defense Appropriations Bill to ban funding for this discriminatory rule. The military understood it. And due to our advocacy, a few years later, the U.S. Navy removed their discriminatory policy, allowing women, especially women of color, to wear their hair in dreadlocks, large buns, braids, and ponytails. We owe it to ourselves and to future generations to take action here in Congress to break down these barriers. Everyone should be able to show up as their authentic selves, and passing the Crown Act is a major step in that direction. I urge my colleagues to vote yes, and I yield back.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to point out the Majority Leader just 3 minutes ago said the reason the bill is on the floor today is because of the minority. That can't happen. We don't schedule the floor. The reason the bill's on the floor today is because the majority is bringing it to the floor. I mean, I would love to be able to have the power as a minority to bring legislation to the floor, because if we could, I tell you what, it wouldn't be this bill. It'd be a bill dealing with energy, a bill trying to bring down the price of gasoline, which is at $5 a gallon in some states. It'd be a bill trying to deal with the border situation. I wish we could schedule the floor. Now, let's hope the American people are going to make a change this fall and put us in a position where we can schedule the floor, because if we do, if we get that power, we will focus on those kind of issues. The majority leader of the House of Representatives just said the reason the bill's on the floor today is because of the minority. That cannot happen. I wish it could, but it can't. Those are the kind of arguments we're getting. We should be focused on the issues the American people want us to focus on right now. Families across this country, all families, want us to focus on certain things, but not the Democrats. They're going to focus on the hair bill. They're going to focus. I would yield to the gentleman from North Carolina.
The gentleman from North Carolina, for how much time, sir? As
much time as he wants.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Jordan, to the point just made, it does strike me that what is being described even by the majority leader or by the chairman of the Judiciary Committee is that some courts in the hundreds of federal courts that we have, I'm not even sure they're all federal that they're describing, but I assume so, have decided that this is not an issue that's covered or under one of the more of these laws. But you know what usually happens is the Congress waits for the court system to work this out to the United States Supreme Court, and when there's a decision there, if the decision is contrary to the intent of Congress, Congress responds. So again, in terms of picking up something that's unnecessary, that's what the majority is doing. It's not Republicans who bring the bill to the floor. It's not Republicans who pick a fight over something that most wouldn't even disagree about, except in circumstances of safety. And then the question becomes one of the degree of burden imposed on employers, whether you want to drive lawsuits. As you said, maybe I was thinking as Mr. Jordan was speaking that it would be nice to bring, since we have, the minority can get issues to the floor. I didn't know that. I've been here just since 2019. We've been in the minority the whole time. And boy, I can think of a lot of things we could bring to the floor. We should bring a bill to unleash American energy independence. We really need that right now. Not just a bill cutting off imports from Russia, not just a bill driving prices higher so that Americans will not only be paying $4 and $5 thanks to Joe Biden at the pump, but they'll soon be paying $6, $7, $8 at the pump. We could bring a bill to the floor, if the minority could do it, we could bring a bill to the floor that would say, let's open up the ability to drill. Let's encourage the energy industry in America to produce the energy that the world needs so that prices will be low. and that Americans across the board, not just a few who have these extraneous handful of cases out of the whole federal court system in which the result has not turned out the way we would like it to have turned out. Let's worry about millions and millions of Americans who have to pay $7 or $8 at the pump every day soon. $4 or $5 now. That would be what I would do if the minority could bring something to the floor. With that, I yield back, Mr. Jordan.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I just want to point out that we don't need new drilling legislation. There are 6,000 leases which have been granted by the federal government, which the oil companies are not drilling. They can drill. I now yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Tennessee, a member of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Cohen.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Nadler. I rise in strong support of H.R. 2116, the Crown Act. No one should be deprived of equal rights under the law because of the hair texture or style. It should never be the case that a person is denied the opportunity to participate in school sports or sent home from work just because of what their hair looks like. The most egregious example of this was a wrestling coach who had a wrestler, an African-American wrestler, have to cut his hair to perform. He wasn't allowed on the wrestling team unless his hair was cut because the wrestling coach didn't like it. Well, the wrestling coach was ignorant of the fact that that should have been his choice. He couldn't rise to understand it. Now, Mr. Bishop and I, we share something in common. We both don't have a wonderful crown with glorious locks. And sometimes when people, particularly people who aren't too smart, get mad at me, and I imagine Mr. Bishop too, they'll say, "You bald-headed whatever." Well, I have no choice in the fact that I'm bald-headed. I had a lot of hair when I was young. I had more hair than Jordan. And no, sir. Well, I'll yield. I'll yield to you, Mr. Bishop.
I just asked, do you think anyone's ever discriminated against you because you're bald?
Well, they've said nasty things and thought it was nasty, and it's not nasty because I have no choice in the fact that I'm
Did
bald.
you bring a lawsuit?
And I'm just as good a human being and just as smart and just as effective and just as caring with or without hair. And the fact is, it's discrimination and it's ignorance. And African Americans have been discriminated against in many ways because of their hairstyle. It's a natural thing for African Americans, and they should not be penalized in their workplace, in sports, in school, or in any other ways. So I stand here for the Crown Act. It was originally introduced, I think, by Cedric Richmond. And I joined with him on the Judiciary Committee to support it. I'd seen problems in Tennessee when I was a state senator and supported bills there to protect people who wore braids and whatever. So I hope that people will rise up, vote yes, in understanding of other people and think beyond themselves. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time is expired. The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Wisconsin, Ms. Moore.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Madam Speaker. Just let me say that, unfortunately, I've never taken psychology during my college preparation, but I do know certain things, what avoidance behavior is. I tell you, the message discipline on that side is just perfect. You could talk about the southern border and inflation and all of that to avoid a very, very, the topic of discrimination. Sit down. I have the floor, sir. You're avoiding the fact, and I know personally, as a person with my hair, that I have had people tell my employer that I was an embarrassment sitting in the front office because of the way my hair looked. And so to avoid a deep conversation about discrimination that has an impact, particularly on African Americans, you talk about everything else. It's wrong, you're not engaging, and quite frankly, you're not being honest. And I would yield back.
Members to direct all remarks to the chair. The gentleman from New York.
No,
the
it's
gentleman
us.
from Ohio reserves.
I would just, thank you, Madam Speaker. Avoiding Sounds to me like the Democrats are avoiding the issues the American people care about. That's our point. I'm focused on what the families in the 4th District of Ohio come to me and talk to me about. They are talking to me about $5 gas, guarantee it. My guess it's the same in all your districts as well. They are talking to me about the border, our southern border, that has been complete chaos now for 14 months. They're definitely talking to me about the price of eggs and milk and butter and food at the grocery, about everything, because we're at a 40-year high inflation. They are talking avoidance. The people who are avoiding the issues the American people care about are on that side. And to get lectured by you and using that is so wrong, so out of touch with the American people. Avoiding, you got to be kidding me. We want to focus on the issues the American people care about. That's the whole darn point. Be happy to yield to my friend from North Carolina for as much time as he'd use.
Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
It's not a question of avoidance, it's a question of priority. Here's a priority. In 2020, homicides across America increased 30%, from 16,005 roughly to 21,005, an additional 5,000 homicides. And even if you want to view it through a racial lens, since that seems to be the subject, 55% of homicides are suffered by black Americans, even though they make up 13% of the population. Of the increase I just described, black Americans suffer 65%. So we could have, if the minority were capable of bringing a bill to the floor, we could bring a bill that would address the rising crime in America. The historically exceptional, historically unprecedented, I believe, at least I saw something since maybe the 1900 or 1902, I don't know what the circumstances were then, but since then, the highest increase of homicides in a single year in the history of the United States, grossly disproportionately borne by black Americans, driven by rhetoric about defunding police. We could prioritize that. That wouldn't be avoidance, and yet we do not, because indeed we are in the minority, and the priorities are being set not by the minority but the majority. I yield back.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
And still I rise, Madam Speaker. And I rise today reminded that Dr. King addressed this very issue decades ago. He addressed it when he shared his poem with us. Fleecy locks and black complexion cannot forfeit nature's claim. Though skin may differ, affection dwells in black and white the same. And were I so tall as to reach the pole or to grasp the ocean at a span, I must be measured by my soul, because the mind is the standard of the man and woman. I have lived long enough now at 74 years to have seen a time when black people would bleach their skin. The product was called Bleach and Glow, so that they could be as white as they could get. I've lived long enough to see them process their hair so that they could make it as straight as they could get it. I've lived long enough now, however, to see black people having decided that they're going to be themselves, they're going to wear their hair as they choose, and they're not going to allow themselves to be discriminated against it because of it. I've lived long enough now to understand that it's not the color of skin or the texture of hair. It's the character within that determines the worth of men and women. I've lived long enough to understand that black people are American people too. And when you say the American people don't want it, you cannot exclude black people. Black people would have this be on the floor. This is a kitchen table issue in black households. Because when Johnny comes home and he's been fired because of his hair, that's a kitchen table issue. That's unemployment. That impacts unemployment. So we have a duty and obligation to do what we're doing, and I will yield back the balance of my time with the understanding that we're going to be ourselves.
Gentleman from New York reserves.
Reserved.
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
We reserve, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Massachusetts, Ms. Presley.
Gentlelady from Massachusetts is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you to my distinguished colleague, House Judiciary Committee Chairman Nadler. I rise today on the floor of the House of Representatives, the People's House, to declare that black girls with our braids, locks, afros, all forms of natural hairstyles, and yes, even our smooth alopecia bald heads belong everywhere. Today, we take an important step towards codifying this fact into law by passing the Crown Act legislation. I'm so proud to co-lead in partnership with Representatives Watson Coleman, Moore, Lee, and Omar. For too long, black girls have been discriminated against and criminalized for the hair that grows on our heads and the way we move through and show up in this world. In my home state, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, 2 twin sisters, Deanna and Maya, high school students, were disciplined for showing up with braids. They were given numerous detentions, kicked off the track team, banned from prom solely for their hairstyle. In their own words, these scholars and athletes were judged more for their heritage than their homework. No more. For those sisters and thousands of other students who face discrimination based on their hair, the Crown Act is for you. For recent graduates who fear they must change their hair or cut their locks to secure a job, the Crown Act is for you. For our elders who have faced and fought this racism for generations, the Crown Act is for you. Just yesterday, the Massachusetts State Legislature made history by passing similar legislation. By passing the Crown Act today, we affirm, say it loud, black is beautiful and so is our hair. Whether you are a student in a classroom, an employee in the workplace, or the next Supreme Court justice or the Speaker pro tem, you deserve to show up as your full self, rocking your crown with your head held high. I urge a yes vote for every person who has been asked to shrink or to apologize simply for the beautiful way with which God made them. I yield back.
Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, we reserve.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 3 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from Texas, a member of the Judiciary Committee, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Ms. Jackson Lee from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
So many years ago, with a bush as big as a bush on my head, an afro, of which I was enormously proud. Young, fragile ego, probably not that strong in my frame. Someone would say skinny legs and high heels. An early teen, trying to express the pain that I felt, living in a segregated world, but trying to assert the prominence of my community, my race of people, trying to associate belatedly with the foot soldiers and the battering and the insults that they received, trying to come to grips with the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy, Malcolm X. I wore this bush, which I had to do extreme things. For the original style, as was done to young girls, is processed. It burned beyond recognition. And I went out with my grandmother, a woman of tradition, and fearful for me, she asked me to go back because she couldn't walk with me with an afro. The reason, of course, was her fear, what an afro signified, what it would do, how I would be harmed. Those were the conflicts and strife that black people went through trying to come to grips with their identity. My good friend, Mr. Jordan, we never encounter each other because we have mutual respect, as I do for you and you do for Sheila Jackson Lee. We don't really get into it because we know we're the kind of folk that stand down from each other. But I enjoy engaging with you. I enjoy your leadership. And your constituents have every right to be concerned about gas prices. My constituents are concerned about eating, being able to pay their rent. And I believe we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Let's get together about gas prices and paying rent and people eating and having jobs and ending discrimination. Why can't we do that together? Because you have not walked in my skin. You've got to understand what it means when we are talking about a report that has been given. In 2019, the Joy Collective, the Crown Act Coalition, disproportionately burdened by policies black people are and practices in public places, including the workplace, that target, profile, or single them out for their natural hairstyles. The Crown study found that black women's hair is more policed in the workplace.
His time has expired.
Gentlelady, an additional 30 seconds.
Gentlelady is recognized for 30
thereby
seconds.
contributing to the climate of group control. Black women are more likely to receive formal grooming policies. And 80% of black women believe that they had to change their hair to be in the workplace. Just imagine the beauty of these hairstyles. Mr. Jordan, the beauty of these hairstyles. This is what we're talking about. People who are severely discriminated against, young boys, young girls. A little girl in a Catholic school could not wear her hair, had to go home. Or the fabulous Serena, who gives joy to all of us. And yet, these are the locks that she is wearing. Can I get another 15? I thank you for recognizing.
I grant the gentlelady an additional 15 seconds.
I thank you, the chairman, very much. And this young boy, who like me, was felt diminished because someone thought it was wrong for me, an afro for him, his braided hair. Mr. Jordan, we have engaged in a lot, but I will not stand down on the Crown Act. We must pass the Crown Act to give dignity and reaffirm the rights of all people. Wear your hair as you desire. I yield
Gentleman
back.
from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
From Ohio reserves.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Excuse me. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Georgia, Ms. Williams.
Gentlelady from Georgia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of the Crown Act because all hair is professional hair. While serving in the Georgia State Senate, a colleague greeted me with what she thought was a compliment. After spending most of the legislative session in braids, I had my natural hair pressed straight. She told me, "Nikema, you should keep your hair that way. It looks better, more professional, more like a state senator." Remarks like this are all too familiar for black women and girls, unacceptable on their own, but the outright discrimination that flows from them is worse. If I didn't work for the people in Congress, I know that I could be fired simply for wearing my hair in braids. Nothing about this is okay. So I make it a point to create an environment where my team feels comfortable wearing their crowns in every texture. Everybody deserves this level of safety, no matter where they work. Our hair is an expression of our authentic selves. Braids, locks, coils, or a silk press, all hair is professional hair. Discrimination has no place in America. That includes discriminating against black hair. The Crown Act would make race-based hair discrimination a thing of the past once and for all, and that's why we should pass it today. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentleman from New York reserves.
Madam Speaker,
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, we reserve.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we're prepared to close.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Ohio. is recognized.
Madam Speaker, for all the reasons we've talked about and what we should be focused on here, I would urge a no vote on the legislation, and I hope my colleagues will do the same. And with that, we yield back the balance of our time.
Gentleman yields back. All time has expired. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, while racism and discrimination sometimes appear in overt forms, they can also manifest themselves in more subtle ways. One way is through discrimination based on natural hairstyles and hair textures associated with people of a particular race or national origin. This Crown Act would make explicit that the civil rights laws prohibit such discrimination. This is a matter of basic fairness and justice. This bill passed the House last Congress unanimously, and I hope we will do so again today. All the arguments we've heard about everything else are interesting and important, but not relevant to this bill. This bill is purely about discrimination, purely about protecting people from discrimination, and we ought to pass it. I urge all members to support this important legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 979, the previous question is ordered on the bill as amended. The question is on the amendment and on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to prohibit discrimination based on an individual's texture or style of hair.
The question is on passage of the bill. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Purpose does a gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
That's for roll call.
Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Connecticut seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut and Jared Golden of Maine, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on H.R. 2116.
So it's going to be that every time. I'll just give you the state.
Okay. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Carter of Texas, I inform the House that Mr. Carter will vote nay on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from
Michigan
rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by the amazing Marcy Captor of the Midwest, I inform the House that she will vote yes on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Harshbarger of Tennessee, I inform the House that Ms. Harshbarger will vote nay on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Mr. Waltz of Florida, I inform the House that Mr. Waltz will vote nay on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
As the member designated by Chairwoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, Chairwoman Lofgren, Representative Clark, and Representative Chantel Brown, I inform the House that these members will vote yea on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Titus of Nevada, the first state to ratify the 15th Amendment, which gave African Americans the right to vote, I inform the House that Ms. Titus will vote yes on H.R. 2116. As the member designated by Ms. Wilson of Florida, birthplace of Ariana Grande, Bob Ross, Sidney Poitier, and Pitbull, I inform the House that Ms. Wilson will vote yes on H.R. 2116. As the member designated by Mr. Larson of Connecticut, known as the Constitution State, I inform the House that Mr. Larson will vote yes on H.R. 2116. And as the member designated by Ms. Dingell of Michigan, the state which has more miles of freshwater shoreline than any other state in the nation, 3,000 to be exact, I inform the House that Ms. Dingell will vote yes on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Russ Fulcher of Idaho, I inform the House that Mr. Fulcher will vote nay on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Walorski from Indiana, I inform the House that Ms. Walorski will vote nay on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Madam Speaker, as member designated by Hank Johnson, Henry Cuellar, and John Garamendi, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Florida rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Ms. Wagner of Missouri, I inform the House that Ms. Wagner will vote nay on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Louis Gomer of the great state of Texas, I inform the House that Mr. Gomer will vote nay on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Calvert of California, I inform the House that Mr. Calvert will vote no on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does this gentlelady from New York rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Deutsch of Florida, I inform the House that Mr. Deutsch will vote yes on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Garbarino from New York, I inform the House that Mr. Garbarino will vote nay on 2116.
taking any chances.
Yeah. When did you do it? For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, is the member designated by Mr. Moulton of Massachusetts, Mr. Swazi of New York, Mr. Trone of Maryland, Mr. Harder of California, Mr. DeSaulnier of California, and Mr. Kind of Wisconsin. I inform the House that these 6 members will vote yes on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Ms. Salazar of Florida, I inform the House that Ms. Salazar will vote nay on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Illinois rise?
Good morning, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Congressman Troy Carter, pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Carter will vote yes on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Norman of South Carolina, I inform the House that Mr. Norman will vote no on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Bowman of New York, I inform the House that he will vote yes on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from New York rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Van Drew of New Jersey, I inform the House that Mr. Van Drew will vote nay on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from from California rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Representative Kim Schreier, I inform the House that Ms. Schreier will vote yes on House Resolution 2116.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from West Virginia rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. LaHood of Illinois, I inform the House that Mr. LaHood of Illinois will vote no on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated for the following members: Lawson of Florida, Rush of Illinois, and Doyle of Pennsylvania. They all vote yes on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Representative Lloyd Smucker of Pennsylvania, I inform the House that Mr. Smucker will vote no on H.R. 2116. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado rise?
To say hello to the Speaker, and as the member designated by Mr. Joe Neguse of Colorado and Mr. Tim Ryan of Ohio, I inform the House that Mr. Neguse and Mr. Ryan will vote yes on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Florida rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Christ of Florida and Ms. Maloney of New York, I inform the House that both members will vote yea on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by my friend, Mr. Upton from Michigan, I inform the House that Mr. Upton will vote no on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Utah rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As member designated by Mr. Curtis of Utah, I inform the House that Mr. Curtis will vote nay on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Fortenberry of Nebraska, I inform the House that Mr. Fortenberry will vote no on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from West Virginia rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Lesko of Arizona, I inform the House that Ms. Lesko of Arizona will vote no on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Barr of Kentucky, I inform the House that Mr. Barr will vote nay on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Mississippi rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. LaMalfa, California, I inform the House that Mr. LaMalfa will vote nay on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Kathy McMorris Rogers, I inform the House that Ms. Rogers will vote nay on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Texas rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Roybal Allard, I inform the House that Ms. Roybal Allard will vote yes on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
As the member designated by Representatives Cardenas and Swalwell, I inform the House that these members will vote aye on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Mr. Albio Series, Mr. Peter Welch, Ms. Ann Kirkpatrick, Mr. Andy Kim, Mr. Bill Pascrell, Mr. Donald Payne, and Mr. Brian Higgins, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. As the member designated by Mr. Dan Crenshaw, Mr. Van Taylor, Mr. Madison Cawthorn, and Mr. Troy Nels, I'd like to inform the House that all four of these members will be voting nay on H.R. 2116. Thank you very much.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Virginia rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by members Connolly, Frankel, McEachin, and Porter, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Brooks, I inform the House that Mr. Brooks will vote no on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Kinzinger of Illinois, I inform the House that Mr. Kinzinger will vote yea on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Michelle Steele of California pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Congresswoman Steele will vote no on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Bergman of the state of Michigan, I inform the House that Mr. Bergman will vote no on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
Madam Speaker, I, as a member designated by Mr. McHenry from the great state of North Carolina, I inform the House that Mr. McHenry will vote no on the bill about hair, H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Pennsylvania rise?
As the member designated by Ms. Dean, I inform the House that Ms. Dean will vote yes on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition?
Speaker, as the member designated by Representative Karen Bass, I inform the House that Representative Bass will vote yes on H.R. 2116.
I beg your pardon, sir. What purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Van Dyne of Texas and pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Ms. Van Dyne will vote no on H.R. 2116.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana rise?
As the member designated Mr. Cahaly, I inform the House that Mr. Cahaly will vote yea on 2116.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Washington rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. McMorris Rogers of Washington State, I inform the House that Ms. McMorris Rogers will vote no on H.R. 2116.
On this vote, The yeas are 235, and the nays are 189, with no one answering present. The Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair Act is passed. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Is this the first thing I read?
The House will be in order. The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does a gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and extend and revise my remarks.
Without objection, gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, we need to protect the American people from corporate greed and abuse. The FAIR Act is one of those protections. Corporations use forced arbitration clauses to deny Americans their right to seek accountability and justice in disputes with private companies. They literally eliminated any chance a resident may have for justice from a dispute, specifically in the place of employment. From employee handbooks to bank accounts to documents to a college admission paperwork, companies include forced arbitration clauses as the main form of dispute resolution so that they can rig the rules and appoint themselves judge and jury in the arbitration process. Forced arbitration is a private, secretive system without any enforceable standards or legal protections for our residents. There is no public disclosure of proceedings or any requirements for arbitrators to follow the law. So, Madam Speaker, forced arbitration makes it virtually impossible for anti-discrimination laws, disability rights laws, and so many other important laws to be enforced at the federal level. To put it simply, this is unjust and has failed the American public for far too long. Earlier this year, President Biden signed a law ending forced arbitration for cases involving sexual assault and sexual harassment. So I urge the Senate to pass this legislation and send it to the President's desk so that we can protect consumers and workers from corporations that seek to exploit them. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
I rise today to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to honor the life of Mr. Ralph Ahn, a pioneer in the Korean American community who exemplified the American dream. Ralph was the youngest child of Dosan An Chang-ho And Ralph joined the United States Navy and bravely served during our country fighting during the World War II. He eventually started acting, following the footsteps of his older brother, Philip Ahn, who was one of the first Asian American actors. Ralph made his film debut as a Korean prisoner in Battered Circus before taking on the roles in Mission Over Korea, Prisoner of War, The Hook, It Takes Two, The Golden Girls, and most recently as Tran on New Girl. I remember last seeing him at an event about a year ago commemorating the Korean American pioneers and Korean independence. While I'm sad that the last generation of the Korean American leaders have passed, I know that their legacy will continue to live on. And I offer my deepest condolences to his beautiful wife, Anne, and his family. With that, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise today to remember Shar Knudsen, former president of the Minnesota AFL-CIO who passed away last month. She was a bridge builder.
The gentlelady will suspend. Does the gentlelady ask for unanimous consent to address the House?
Yes, I do. Thank you for that correction, Madam Speaker.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to remember Shar Knudsen, former president of the Minnesota AFL-CIO, who passed away last month. She was a bridge builder, trailblazer, and mentor. Shar was a lifelong advocate for workers in St. Paul and across Minnesota, a trailblazer herself, the first woman to lead the Minnesota AFL-CIO. She mentored women in the labor movement and urged them to run for leadership. She was a strong booster for pro-women labor supporters seeking public office. Her early and steadfast support and encouragement was instrumental in me in helping to run for Congress and advance our common values together. Hosting Shar as my guest for President Obama's first official State of the Union address in Washington, D.C. was a privilege. Madam Speaker, please allow me to enter into the record February 22nd, 2022 article from the Union Advocate newspaper in St. Paul paying tribute to Shar Knudsen's life and work.
Without objection.
I'm thankful for the opportunity to work with Shar Knudsen, to call her a friend. Her presence will be missed. Her legacy lives on. And with that, I yield back, Madam Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to speak for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Inflation is a thief, and many of us believe that the Federal Reserve is behind the curve in fighting that thief, inflation. History is repeating itself, Madam Chair, and Jay Powell is now fighting and facing precisely what his predecessor, Arthur Burns, called the anguish of central banking in 1979. Sustained stagflation, high current inflation, growing high inflationary expectations, and now a commodity shock. These are all the problems that Chair Burns faced in the 1970s. And while I welcome the Fed's action to shrink the balance sheet and start with a 25 basis point increase in short-term rate targets, this process should have started in 2020. And in my view, they should have been more aggressive this week and supported a 50 basis increase in short-term rates. It's time for Congress to reassess and debate the central bank's mandate. In my view, the Fed should have a single mandate focused on containing inflation and keeping prices in check for Americans at the pump, at the grocery store, and whenever they pull out their wallet. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to celebrate the passage of this year's omnibus spending bill and to express my excitement for the community project funding the 4th District of Illinois will receive. These crucial funds, totaling over $10 million, will expand affordable housing, improve access to health care, support violence prevention and counseling, and even build an enclosure around a community swimming pool, an absolute must-have in the Windy City. Working-class immigrant neighborhoods like mine have never gotten that kind of investment and resources that other neighborhoods have. I started as an activist to change that, to bring resources to my community, and I'm proud to announce that this vital funding package will transform countless lives. I yield back.
For what purpose does a gentlewoman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to recognize Todd and Louise Maleka, the 2022 winners of the Farm Journal's Top Producer of the Year Award. Located in the heart of Minnesota's 7th District in Villard, Minnesota, Maleka Enterprises is a multi-generational, family-run dairy, pumping, and custom work operation. Both Todd and Louise grew up on dairy farms, and now 5 of their 7 children are in the family business. Louise loves being able to see the next generation getting involved and taking up the reins. Their company values include integrity, trust, and a commitment to constant and never-ending improvement. With values like that, it's no wonder they receive such a prestigious award. Congratulations to the Malekas for this impressive achievement. And Madam Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does a gentlewoman from Georgia seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
I rise today to commemorate the 1-year anniversary of the Atlanta spa shooting. Across our country, the Asian American community has been under attack because of misinformation and xenophobia that wrongly blame them for the COVID-19 pandemic. On March 16, 2021, 1 year ago in Atlanta, 8 innocent people, 6 of whom were women of Asian descent, were senselessly murdered. The victims of this attack included mothers and grandmothers, fathers and sons, teachers and veterans. These are lives that cannot be restored, leaving pain that cannot be forgotten. These attacks in Georgia were a wake-up call for the public to the reality of anti-American hate and what the Asian American community is facing each and every day. Acts of violence like these demonstrate why we must always call out bigotry and hate whenever or wherever we see it. We must all speak out against it. I would like to thank KPAC Chair Judy Chu for her leadership on this issue and encourage my colleagues to continue to speak out as we stand together with the Asian American community. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does a gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, the Biden administration has a backup plan to address rising gas prices. If their Secretary of Transportation's comical recommendation for every American to buy an electric car doesn't pan out. Unfortunately, the plan includes secret talks with Venezuela, led by corrupt dictator Nicolas Maduro, about lifting sanctions on importing Venezuelan oil into the United States. And of course, if that doesn't work out, there is always Saudi Arabia and the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, otherwise known as OPEC. Because surely begging an oil cartel to make a deal to increase oil production could never go wrong. What's next? Buying oil from Iran, the world's leading exporter of terrorism? This begs the question, is this all that the Biden administration has to offer the American people in a time of crisis? Buy oil from corrupt dictators or buy a costly electric vehicle that you can't afford? These are not the ideals on which America was built, but regrettably, this is President Biden's America. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I ask 1 minute to address the House with unanimous consent.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, Vladimir Putin attempts to drape the Iron Curtain over Russia once again. I stress the importance of working together with our European allies to support Ukraine's sovereignty and democracies around the world. Make no mistake about it, this is the test of our time. As a co-chair of the Transatlantic Legislators Dialogue, I work closely with my European co-chair, Radek Sikorski. Congress and the European Parliament have taken steps to deal with this pariah Putin. Congress has passed $13.6 billion last week for Ukraine and to support humanitarian aid, military assistance, and economic resolve. American allies such as Poland and other European countries are doing a great deal to deal with the refugee problem. President
Biden separately provided an additional $800 million for Stinger missiles and other anti-aircraft, anti-armor weapons to help the valiant, brave Ukrainians. Members of the European Parliament have also done their part with another $500 million in assistance. NATO today is stronger than at any time since the Cold War, but there is much more work ahead of us. We must continue to unite the front of Vladimir Putin with our European allies. As President Zelensky reminded
time
us,
is expired.
the cost of freedom is not free. Thank you.
Thank you. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, several weeks ago, we witnessed a very unfortunate milestone, the 80th anniversary of the signature of an executive order by the President of the United States to incarcerate over 100,000 Japanese Americans during World War II. This was a direct violation of the founding principles of our country that say that no one should be deprived of their liberty without just cause. That's why I was so proud to see this body pass my bill, H.R. 6434, this week, that would create a historic network of sites linked to the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. Madam Speaker, the power of history is to gain perspective and learn from the mistakes of the past, and I'm in hopes that this network will call attention to this unjust imprisonment and ensure that this injustice never occurs in the United States again. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition, from California seek recognition?
To address the House for, I request to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Democrats are building a better America for the people. Last year, we passed the American Rescue Plan that has helped to create 7.4 million jobs in 13 months, the most in U.S. history. Under the Biden administration, wages are up, jobs are up, and unemployment is down. What are Republicans doing? I don't know, but I do know that 2 of them attended a white nationalist conference last month. And let me now tell you all the actions that House Republican leadership took against these 2 Republican members who attended and spoke at a white nationalist conference last month. I yield back.
For what purpose does a gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, Congressman Vargas and I rise today to celebrate the incredible life of Francine Mailligue and the indelible mark she left on San Diego. Francine was an artist and an advocate, a journalist, a motivational speaker, and, as so many in San Diego knew her, a public servant. As district director in the California State Assembly, Francine made sure that San Diegans had equitable access to the resources they needed and deserved. Even after her cancer diagnosis in 2019, Francine kept working to serve our community while also becoming a powerful advocate for cancer research. Francine was a proud advocate for San Diego's Filipino and Asian American communities. She served as the president of the Filipino American Chamber of Commerce of San Diego County and proudly highlighted the Filipino experience across the country and around the world. Last month, Francine passed away after her battle with cancer. Congressman Vargas and I join so many from across San Diego in sending our condolences to Francine's family, friends, and loved ones. May her memory be a blessing. I yield back.
For what purpose does a gentleman from Alabama seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I request permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I've been asked many times this week about my thoughts on the address to Congress by President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. I was moved and inspired by his commitment to the defense of his stricken nation and its besieged people. President Zelensky's remarks reminded me of another time when a courageous and determined leader sought the aid of America in defense of his nation as it was being threatened by the armed might of Hitler's Nazi forces. On February 9, 1941, Winston Churchill addressed the British Parliament with a speech that was broadcast by the BBC. Churchill spoke to Parliament, but he was really speaking to the United States and in particular to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. At the end of that speech, Churchill said this: "Put your confidence in us. Give us your faith and your blessing, and under providence, all will be well." He concluded his message to Parliament and to America by saying, "Give us the tools, and we will finish the job." That is what I heard President Zelensky saying to Congress of the United States. Madam Speaker, it is time to listen to the people who are face to face with the enemy fighting for their country. They know better. May I extend it 10 seconds?
Chair cannot entertain that request.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does a gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
As President Zelensky said, we are the leaders of peace. The President is the leader of world peace. Thank you, President Biden, for recognizing the crisis and the murder and pillage and slaughter of babies in Ukraine. Let us continue to stand together, but I am fighting for as much to be able to solve the Ukraine crisis as I am for peace. Let me also acknowledge this past week the remembering of those who were killed in Atlanta that exhibited the worst kind of Asian hate. Let us stand together against such hate and stand together for what is right. Let me also mention the fighters at the Pleasantville Village senior citizen housing. They have been fighting against eviction, against disrespect, and against the complete altering of their living quarters. They determined, and they should have, quality of life housing. I'm asking the new owner to stand down and to allow this housing project or this housing facility to be for seniors in their later lives so they can have a better quality of life. I will continue to fight to ensure that they have a place to live that is safe and best for them. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, from war in Europe to pandemic around the world to potential crisis in Asia, one of the lessons we are learning is that America should never be dependent on strategic adversaries like China or Russia for the goods most critical to our economic and national security, whether it's PPE or pharmaceutical ingredients or microchips or the advanced battery technologies that will power the future. We must bring our supply chains home. We can do this by enacting into law the bipartisan supply chain resiliency provisions in the America Competes Act. This section of the bill, which I helped write, makes one of the biggest investments to spur domestic manufacturing in our nation's history. It's been endorsed by the National Association of Manufacturers, the United Steelworkers, the National Defense Industry Association, more than 20 organizations, and the list is growing each day. I urge that any competitiveness bill that goes to the President for his signature include these important provisions in the America Competes Act. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last Friday marked the 1-year anniversary of the Biden bailout bill. This $2 trillion package has directly led to worker shortages, billions in waste, and the worst inflation in 40 years. The Biden bailout didn't rescue our economy. It ruined a recovery that was already underway. $500 billion spent to incentivize business closures, lockdowns, and anti-science masking policies. Billions wasted, misused, or repurposed for projects unrelated to the pandemic. Florida golf courses, checks for prisoners and Japanese citizens, trees for New York, libraries in the president's home state, The list goes on. And as a result, American families are finding it harder to put food on their table, clothes on their backs, and gasoline in their car. President Biden sold the American people a COVID package that spent less than 9% for fighting COVID. He created a massive worker
time has
shortage
expired.
and instigated the highest inflation in a generation. That's his legacy.
For what purposes does the gentlewoman from Washington seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I rise today as a member of the Washington State delegation to honor the service and sacrifice of Pierce County Sheriff Deputy Dom Collada. He was killed in the line of duty after pursuing a man wanted for second-degree assault. I've been told that he had a tireless work ethic and was someone who went above and beyond his commitment to our community and to our nation. In addition to his role as a deputy, he was also in the National Guard and previously served in the U.S. Army. But he and his family's commitment to the community doesn't stop there. He was also an organ donor. It is just one more way that he and his family have stepped up to support others in need. He is nothing short of a hero. His loss is a devastating blow to our community, and I'm thinking and praying for the Pierce County Sheriff's Office, Dom's family, friends, and loved ones. I hope all of us in this House will take a moment to remember Deputy Collada and his contributions to our community and to our nation. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 4th, 2021, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Gothman, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you. I'd like to comment a little bit on some of the issues that have been out there this week, issues that are important issues, but for whatever reason, I don't think the public has been adequately informed as to what is going on. The first issue I'd like to talk about concerns the bill yesterday regarding trade relations with Russia and an earlier bill with regard to oil exports from Russia, and that is an incredibly important provision in that bill that has been not discussed in the mainstream media, which is an amendment of something called the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act. Today, before that bill is signed, the U.S. President can sanction foreign leaders or foreign, I guess pretty much any foreign person, certainly any foreign elected official, if they violated any human rights. And the definition of human rights is fairly narrowly defined. When we think of horrible foreign leaders, we think of murder, we think of kidnapping, we think of holding people without trial for excessive periods of time. And we think if somebody's going to be sanctioned, they should be responsible for those human rights abuses. In this bill, we change the definition of human rights to be open-ended, whatever the president thinks human rights are. And furthermore, we allow sanctioning of people who are indirectly responsible for violating human rights. Already the United States weighs in when countries try to preserve laws that were the laws of the United States not long ago. And I'll say that's with regard to two areas, LGBTQ agenda and abortion. Already when you talk to people from Eastern Europe, the Caribbean, the Dominican Republic in particular, Central and South America, people are mad because the United States throws around its substantial economic weight to fight the Christian beliefs of these countries. Now, if these bills were signed to become law, if the Senate does not amend them, the president will have a new tool in his toolbox if he wants to force other countries to adapt the views of abortion and the views of LGBTQ that are the views, quite frankly, of the left wing of the Democrat Party. The president will be able to threaten the parliaments, or for all I know, lobbyists, demonstrators in foreign countries, by saying you can't get a visa to the United States because we don't like your stand on abortion. We don't like your stand on LGBTQ. They can take assets in the United States. And we're told this was something that was threatened, at least the visa thing was threatened with regard to elected officials in the Dominican Republic. If you don't follow the U.S. party line, you are not going to get a visa to the United States. We're going to take your assets in the United States, take your bank accounts. You know, John Adams said that our Constitution was made for a moral and religious country. This is kind of going the opposite way. We hold contempt with people, religious people, and say that we are going to weigh in with all the gifts we've been given, the financial gifts we've been given. We are going to weigh in as a country and say that we are going to use those assets to punish foreign leaders who had Christian beliefs that not so long ago were held by the vast majority of Americans. I hope the press reports on this latest power grab of the president. I hope the public wakes up and makes sure that when these bills come back from the Senate, and that is to say bills with regard to trade, bills with regard to oil, that they do not include this great increased power of the president to punish, quite frankly, Christian countries. I don't think that's been adequately addressed, and I think in most newspaper articles it wasn't addressed at all. Now I'll address something else. I'm going to talk a little bit about inflation. A lot has been said about inflation recently, and a lot of it focuses on the price of gas, but there's high inflation everywhere. I have a very large manufacturing district. I tour my manufacturers all the time. It is not unusual to find manufacturers whose cost for metals are up 400 or 500%, well before there was an invasion of the Ukraine. Every manufacturer I talk to tells me that they expect big inflation in the next year. And again, that was before the invasion. I want to draw your attention to the graph here of the M2 monetary supply. And you can look, we begin down around 1970, 1965, the amount year over year that the monetary supply goes up. And it sometimes goes up 6 or 7% per year. Those were in the bad old days of the 1970s and the inflation that kind of hit its peak during Jimmy Carter. It kind of went up and down, and we went through a lot of years in which inflation was relatively low historically, 1 or 2%. Then you look in the last couple of years, and some of this was due to overspending on the COVID, but more recently we also have the American Rescue Plan, in which apparently financial literates felt the way to benefit the economy was to have the Federal Reserve print as much money as it can. Now look at this graph. Look at what an aberration we're in at this time, where the money supply is going up year over year over 35%. I mean, you don't need to be a PhD in economics to know what's going to happen. The cost of everything is going to go through the roof, oil being one of those things that's going to go through the roof, but the cost of food, the cost of any manufactured goods. I talked to farmers in my district, the cost of fertilizer, cost of any other chemicals, through the roof. They're going to have to pass that on. So before you say that this inflation had anything to do with Ukraine, you look at what the M2 money supply was like even before Ukraine. This is such an aberration from anything else we've experienced in the United States. And it comes from people who have convinced themselves that you can spend unlimited on anything and there's no cost to pay. I hope that the press in this country gets a hold of a graph like this and gives it to the American people so they can see where we are and why cost of everything is through the roof. I really think the value of the dollar, not only the last couple months, but over the next few years, is going to go downhill like nothing we've ever seen before. I think since we switched to the Federal Reserve System in whatever it was, 1916, 1917, we are now in uncharted territory. And some people say, you know, we should never have paper money because Congress won't be able to risk destroying the value of the nation's currency. Well, it hasn't happened until now, but wow. And as amazing as it is, as horrible as these numbers are, the majority party talks about still trying to pass a Build Back Better bill that'll make this go up even more rapidly. So I beg the press corps to pay attention to the monetary supply and connect the dots as to why we have such inflation. Thank you. Now, there's another issue that's going on, and I think to a certain extent, because of the Ukraine, it's been pushed into the background, but it's still a vitally important issue, and that is what's going on the border. Just because Kamala Harris has been appointed the Border Patrol czar, and she does absolutely nothing as far as we can tell, doesn't mean we should stop talking about this huge tragedy. In February, we had 165,000 encounters with the Border Patrol, up 63% over last year. There were about 72,000 people let into the country, and they can guess, the fingers aren't out there, guess that ICE let in another 19,000 more. Of that amount, 9,000 were unaccompanied minors. If an unaccompanied minor shows up at the southern border, we don't turn them back to their parents. They usually write an address on their T-shirt, and we send them off to their aunt and uncle, whoever, could be just a friend, whatever, and that's just par for the course. We pay to put the little child on the airplane. We pay to ship them somewhere, maybe not their parents, maybe just friends, whatever. If you want to talk about divided families, or breaking up families, you look at the current system where every month 9,000 kids who are younger than age 18 are let in this country without their parents. Then I had a staffer go down there because we had to work late last week, but I will be down there next week. And there were some other observations as far as what it's like on the border. Gangs play music on the Mexican side of the border as people march across. It's a festive atmosphere. Nobody even pretends that the United States cares about what's going on at their border. The drug gangs make $3 billion a year, we believe, transporting people here. As from $2,000 to $20,000 is what the charges are to come here, because they run that border. It's not just lack of leadership from our vice president. The California Highway Patrol can't report illegals they find to ICE because of the, I would almost call it, treasonous behavior of one of our states. Increasingly, we are getting people coming here who not only they don't speak Spanish, they speak an indigenous language from southern Mexico or more likely from Central America, which is obviously very difficult to process. And you have to wonder about the wisdom of letting people in this country when nobody can speak their language. We are getting people from Iran, Iraq, Uzbekistan. These people, which of course are breeding grounds for terrorism, are paying up to $20,000 a head to come into this country. Doesn't that concern anybody? The hotels, the airlines in Mexico obviously know this is going on because people take airlines from, for example, Cancun to Mexicali, hotels south of the border, and we know these are being used by illegal immigrants. But because it's becoming so common, it is built into the Mexican economy. Obviously, when we do so little to prevent this illegal immigration, morale from the Border Patrol is low. How would you like it if you are taking a job, sometimes recently they've even been shot at, taking a dangerous job like that and getting as little support from the executive branch as you can imagine? Actually, I did notice in the recent appropriation bill that passed last week, we are putting a lot more money into monitoring the Border Patrol and making sure they're not mistreating people. You know, it's not a big concern for us apparently when an illegal immigrant shoots at a Border Patrol agent, but you know, we have to put millions of dollars more into people to make sure the Border Patrol is not breaking the law. No wonder the Border Patrol does not feel good about their situation right now. I'll give you another example of the brazenness of the illegals coming here. Right now, migrants aren't afraid to call 911 and get escorted with a ride to where they want to go. And we just taxi them in. If they're kind of wandering around, let's make a 911 call. And they show up, nothing wrong with them, no health care problem. We just use our local emergency services as an escort service. We still have a situation in which people don't have to be tested for COVID. Okay, but it's kind of strange that American citizens, say if you work for a hospital, are required to get a vaccine, and we don't even test you if you're trying to come in this country. It shows, what are the priorities here? Special interest, people coming in from what we call special interest countries are going up, be it Pakistan, Yemen, Iraq, countries like this. So in any event, I encourage that the press, and that encourages the so-called conservative press, or the balanced press, to report to America when we are having 80 or 90,000 people cross the border every month, report what type of people are coming here, report on the mass decrease of the number of deportations, as even people who've committed crimes are removed at a much lower rate than they were by Donald Trump. Because I do think if we look back at America 10 years from now and say, how did the policies of 2022 affect America? Still, the number one damaging thing is that we ignored our border. And I'll point out one more thing about ignoring the border. We right now do have a crisis in the Ukraine. Hopefully we're not going to have a similar crisis in Taiwan. I have felt all along that an effect of not enforcing our border is to tell foreign leaders who don't like us that we have kind of a wimpy, ineffective, incompetent government in charge right now. Other normal countries do not let 90 to 100,000 people a month cross into their country. And leaders around the world look at that, and they quite frankly think that the current executive branch of this country is not a serious elected official, and they challenge somebody who is not a serious elected official. There's no doubt in my mind that if we had been enforcing that border and taken a tougher stance other places around the world, we wouldn't be in this mess in Ukraine like we are today. The next issue that I think has disappeared a little bit is with regard to the COVID. We are now in a dip in new people getting COVID, but I think in the last week, we're still around 5,000 people who died of the COVID. I think so far I've known the last 4 people I know who've died of the COVID really haven't had a lot else wrong with them, maybe nothing else wrong with them. And I think there are a couple things that have been underreported or not focused on. I have railed for almost 2 years here on vitamin D. There was a study out of Israel that was released fairly recently that said that if you were deficient in vitamin D, and in the study they say deficient being 20 nanograms per milligram, which is pretty deficient, but you'd be 11 times more likely to die of the COVID. Now, given all the massive amount of ink, they still use ink, and the massive amount of time that has been spent educating the public on how to avoid COVID or avoid dying from COVID, I would think a little bit more time would be spent by the public health establishment looking at the effects of vitamin D. 11 times more likely to die if you're under 20 nanograms. What can we do about that? First of all, it ought to be publicized. Secondly, it should be par for the course that particularly if you're older and go in for a checkup, that your doctor gives you a vitamin D test. Now, right now, your reimbursement levels for that test may not be quite up for the cost. We all know that the medical establishment in America today, particularly the hospitals, are so obsessed with money, but people are dying out there. And if you test somebody for vitamin D and they're down around 15 or 17 nanograms, you can alert that person and perhaps save a life. There are all sorts of people walking around with insufficient vitamin D levels. They don't even know it. They don't know the importance of it. I will also point out that they should especially point out the value of vitamin D to people of color. We know people of color are more likely to have low levels of vitamin D, and therefore the incompetence or the failure of the public health establishment not to educate people on vitamin D has way disproportionately affected people of color. I mean, they talk about people of color a lot in this institution, and I think a lot of times they talk about prejudice that's not there. But here you have something in which people are dying overwhelmingly, and for whatever reason, the public health establishment does not ring the alarm as far as how much darker skin increases the possibility that you are going to get serious COVID. So I beg the CDC and the public health establishment to focus a little bit more on vitamin D. I will also point out that different doctors have different opinions as how you should treat somebody for vitamin D. And I have no problem finding doctors who find that drugs like ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine given early will save lives. And a lot of times those same doctors feel a drug called remdesivir is not effective. Now, I don't think the subcommittee that we've had here has studied that enough, but remdesivir, apparently the hospitals, and this is largely the drug companies getting the money, but you're going to get billed out over $3,000 a day for the treatment, and the treatment for ivermectin is nominal. I talk to doctors, smart doctors, doctors that are well published, who tell me that they could have saved tens of thousands, maybe over 100,000 lives if doctors could give the drugs that were originally prescribed for another purpose. But the doctors aren't allowed to by the hospitals that they work for. This is a potential scandal. I would think normally the press would be a little bit inquisitive when we say one drug is worth $3,200 a day and one drug is under $50 a day, and smart doctors feel the drug for $50 a day or under $50 a day is more effective. But for whatever reason, we don't talk about it. And the reason we don't talk about it, and if something wrong is going on around here, the reason they're able to get away with wrong things going on is because the press doesn't highlight it. And the reason why hospitals are not giving drugs that some doctors feel are more effective is directives from the NIH. And again, I think drug companies have too much power in this town, but it is something that should be looked into by the media, and it surprises me that some people still aren't aware of this. The final thing that we'll focus on here a little bit, as far as what's going on in the Ukraine. I still feel that for whatever reason, we have not done enough, and I've talked about it here, we haven't done enough to discuss the Holodomor. The Holodomor was the starvation of 4 million Ukrainians in the early 1930s by the communist government. At the time, it was underreported in the United States because at that time, for reasons unknown to me, I wasn't around at the time, it's a mystery to me today, the New York Times was perceived to be the paper of record, and the New York Times, a guy by the name of Walter Duranty, decided not to talk about the starvation. He decided to keep it secret. Probably because at the time, the intellectuals, the type of people who work at the big newspapers, liked to look upon the left favorably. And because it was communists who were starving people, it's not something they like to talk about. I do not know how you can intelligently talk about the relationships between Ukraine and Russia without talking about the 4 million, and that's the low estimate, by the way. Other people talk about 15 million. Without talking about the 4 million Ukrainians who were starved to death by the communist Marxist government that ran the Soviet Union at that time. I would again ask that our press run special features on the starvation that took place 90 years ago. When, first of all, when 4 million people are starved, it should be something every American school child knows about anyway. But secondly, when you look at the animosity of the Ukrainians towards the Russians, that certainly plays a big role. And I have a sneaking suspicion the reason we don't talk about it is because it is one more embarrassment to the atheistic totalitarian left that some powerful people in this country like to look up to. So again, I wish that the newspapers would cover the Holodomor, and I wish that the schools would cover it, because no school child should be able to graduate from high school without knowing about this. And it's also important so they can be on the lookout for big government atheists wherever they are. I think you also have to know about what the big government atheists did to understand why we fought in Korea, to see why we fought in Vietnam. But America's school children, quite frankly, well older than the school children, are blissfully ignorant of the Holodomor and what can happen if you let a bunch of atheistic totalitarian big government types take over the government. The final thing that I'm going to focus on here a little bit, I have before thanked President Biden for giving a State of the State speech and not talking about racism. But I still think one of the problems we have with high crime in this country, and my district borders the city of Milwaukee. The city of Milwaukee, for the second time last year, had the highest murder rate they've ever had. When I was a child, the city of Milwaukee was the safest of the 25 biggest cities in the country, but we've gone downhill. And I think a lot of that is the police have been beat up, they're called racist, and they are afraid to do their job. They're afraid for being a complaint filed against them. We still have a bill floating around Congress saying it should be easier to sue police. And as the result, we do get these high murder rates. In addition to the high murder rates, we have, together with our lax policy at the border, 100,000 people dying every year from drug overdoses. That again, it was 45,000 7 years ago. That was high. And I think whether it's 45,000 or 100,000 people's eyes glaze over. If it was your child, if it was your sibling who died of a drug overdose, maybe your eyes wouldn't glaze over. But the media in this country, their eyes have glazed over, and we continue to let people die. So in conclusion, in any event, my final ask here is that President Biden, who has done what he can to fan the flames of saying police are racist, I think would do a lot towards making it easier to hire police around the country and easier to be an effective policeman if he would publicly apologize to the police of this country for his slandering them and his compatriots slandering them, and tell them what a good job they're doing. So those are some of the issues that I hope the press would pick up on. In conclusion, I will make one more comment with regard to the Ukraine. This is a disaster for Ukraine. It's just a horrible thing. We all feel so good about how brave they are, about the fight they've put up. Eventually, that war's got to end. And I never feel, when I'm dealing with members of this administration or Congress in general, quite frankly, that there's enough focus on ending the war. There are newspaper reports that saying Israel might be getting involved in trying to negotiate an end. But the United States is still the most important, powerful country in the world. And I wish the administration would take a little bit more time trying to negotiate an end to that conflict. Thank you very much.
The gentleman yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 4th, 2001, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Soto, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, the Republicans lost the majority and the presidency because of their incompetence on COVID and the economy, and passed a tax cut for the rich that exploded the deficit by $400 billion and the debt by $4 trillion. So forgive me if I won't stand here and be lectured about fiscal responsibility from folks who took their only moment in charge to give windfalls to the wealthiest Americans. And now they're desperate to paint a sad picture of America. They're invested in our nation's failure solely as a desperate move to try to get back to power. Meanwhile, we Democrats are delivering. First, we defended democracy. I was up there in the chamber on January 6th when a violent insurrection attempted to stop the democratic, peaceful transfer of power. This violent insurrection was stoked by my Republican colleagues. They don't want to talk about that now, but that's too bad. They attacked our democracy. They desecrated this chamber by stoking extremism, yet we got back here and they voted no and we voted yes to make sure that American voters were heard and certified Joe Biden's election as president. And yes, some brave Republicans joined us because they realized it was treason. We will defend democracy and hold those responsible accountable through the January 6th committee. Second, we got the pandemic under control. We passed the American Rescue Plan, put shots in arms, money in pockets, got kids back to school and families back to work. Every American had access to the vaccine, every American. And life is getting back to normal. We stopped a Great Recession back in Florida, where we both have the honor of representing. We stopped a foreclosure crisis that knocked in half people's wealth, hurt through the generations so many homeowners in Florida and across the nation. Unemployment is down to 4% nationally and under 4% in Florida. Yet no Republicans voted for it. Third, we passed the largest infrastructure law in our nation's history. The infrastructure plan will upgrade America, roads and bridges, clean air and water, airports and ports, high-speed internet access for all Americans, including rural Americans left behind before, and brownfield restoration and other environmental restoration. 10 Republicans voted for it. We applaud them. But they were ridiculed by their own party for voting for infrastructure. What is wrong with the minority leaders in this chamber if they're going to attack their own members for investing in America, something that they had the chance to do? I would have voted for it under then President Trump for an infrastructure package, but they failed to do it. We got it done. Then Democrats led this House to pass a bipartisan National Defense Authorization Act. That is to protect the homeland, fund our military, support our troops. We passed a bipartisan budget just last week to meet the needs of the American people, jobs, health care, education, the environment, local projects. Yes, supporting a robust immigration system and making sure that we can meet all the needs of the American people. We also had bipartisan support for the war in Ukraine, the relentless and disgraceful invasion by Russia of Ukraine. We have supplied them with military weapons, training, humanitarian relief, and we will defend democracy in Europe with that $14 billion we passed in a bipartisan fashion here. And yes, we need to still continue to address COVID-19 related inflation. First, by getting COVID-19 under control, our economy is finally producing more goods again. Things are more efficient now. People are buying more services again to balance that out. Second, our infrastructure law will upgrade our ports, our airports, and our highways to improve supply chains. Third, we're addressing price gouging of companies that are taking advantage, particularly in gas and grocers. Fourth, we're boosting domestic oil production to compensate for the Russian oil ban, which was very popular and demanded upon by my constituent and others. And in the long term, we're investing in renewable energy. And yes, the Federal Reserve will do their part to help make sure we could address COVID-related and Ukraine war-related inflation. And we need to do this together rather than politicize it. And next, we're turning the corner to go to American Competes Act, Madam Speaker, bringing American manufacturing jobs back home, something that people have talked about for years. We will get this done. We've had bipartisan support in the Senate. We had some bipartisan support in the House. We'll now go to conference. And what will that mean? Bringing back home more microchip manufacturing, which has made it harder to get cars on trucks onto American car lots. We can make it here at home. We can make it in America. We'll bring back personal protective equipment and other healthcare manufacturing to help out like we saw during the pandemic where it was a huge issue. We'll bring back telecommunications equipment. We invent telecommunications equipment, but so much of it, all of it, is made overseas. And with China now spying on us, we need to make sure we have our domestic production ready to go. And pharmaceutical production, biosimilar production, aerospace production like we do in East Orange County, as well as space production, having the busiest spaceport in the world, 70% of space flights going through there at Cape Canaveral, something that we beam with pride about in Florida. So as we hear about the mistakes of the past and trying to invest in failure by many Republicans in this chamber, the Democratic majority is defending democracy. We have gotten COVID under control. We have passed a major infrastructure package. We have passed bipartisan bills for the budget, for our military, for the war in Ukraine. And now we go on next to bring American jobs home with the American Competes Act. The future is bright if we work together, Madam Speaker. In honor of Women's History Month, I would like to recognize Ashley Marie Wright. Ashley Marie Wright is a mother, dynamic visionary, and results-oriented leader. She founded Wright on the Time Educational Services in 2006, which provides customized educational solutions to communities that desire to open a school, solve an educational problem, or require management services. WOT focuses on developing innovative learning environments that cultivate the entire student in a way that empowers them to be impactful leaders of tomorrow. As the founder of New Beginnings High School in 2011, Ashley successfully implemented a unique educational model that provides an innovative and nurturing educational experience, which is available to all students in Central Florida. Thousands of students who were once unsuccessful in traditional public school model are now thriving, graduating from high school and pursuing postgraduate opportunities due to Ashley's unparalleled work. Before her role as founder of NBHS, Ashley established herself as an education professional by being an exceptional teacher and ultimately climbing the career ladder to become a principal at the age of 25. As a result of her modus operandi, she is widely acclaimed as a business leader who genuinely cares about the growth of each child. Her ability to effectively raise students' academic prowess and self-esteem helps bolster their performance amidst any present challenges they may have. Today, she builds and operates schools utilizing her education ethos to replicate her success. Ms. Wright graduated from Florida State University in 2003, gave birth to a beautiful and precocious Victoria Marie in 2007, and started her own charter system in 2010. Her passion, upbringing, and love for empowering others through education laid the framework for her unique education and management methodology. Building on her parents' legacy, award-winning educators Dr. Clint and Deborah Wright, Ashley continues a shift to education paradigm and changes lives for the better, one community at a time. For this and more, Ashley Marie Wright, we honor you. In honor of Women's History Month, I would like to recognize Asma Patel. Asma Patel is a board-certified community attorney who has diligently served and continues to serve Osceola County. Ms. Patel holds dual degrees with honors in psychology and legal studies, as well as a Juris Doctorate degree. During her law school career, Ms. Patel was a student ambassador, mentor, and the president of Muslim Law School Association at her alma mater. She honed her dispute resolution skills by competing in and ultimately winning first place in an international law school mediation tournament. During this time, she continued to demonstrate her dedication to serving her community as a Guardian ad litem fellow. In this role, she played a crucial role as a representative for abused, abandoned, and neglected children. Ms. Patel has spearheaded community initiatives aimed at ending domestic violence. As a certified domestic abuse victim advocate, she assisted survivors in crisis by providing essential resources and support. In an effort to create awareness, she has hosted family empowerment seminars and tabled at events aimed at tackling domestic abuse. Through mentorship, extensive networking, and volunteerism, Ms. Patel has worked with marginalized and vulnerable communities, striving to bring light and change to the social injustices that plague them. Most recently, she has begun to help the issue of inaccessibility to feminine hygiene products by providing these products to local Title I schools. Ms. Patel's Bridge the Gap initiative in Osceola County is inspired by her desire to take action that empowers women to be courageous in the pursuit of dreams. For this and more, Ms. Asma Patel, we honor you. In honor of Women's History Month, I would like to recognize Deputy Chief Betty Holland. Deputy Chief Betty Holland is a 34-year veteran of the law enforcement profession. She currently works for the Kissimmee Police Department as Deputy Chief of Operations Bureau. Before coming to Kissimmee Police Department in March of 2018, she worked for the Polk County Sheriff's Office for 30 years, where she retired as a captain. Deputy Chief Holland has held several prominent supervisory positions in the law enforcement community, including her time as the Criminal and Strategic Investigations Lieutenant and overseeing the Criminal Justice Academy as captain. Deputy Chief Holland received her Bachelor of Science in Business and Professional Leadership from Southeastern University and her Master of Public Administration from Troy University. In addition, she is a graduate of the Southern Police Institute's Administrative Officers course from the University of Louisville and a graduate of Certified Public Manager program at Florida State University. Deputy Chief Holland's first thoughts of a law enforcement career surfaced at 15. Her best friend's dad was a retired deputy sheriff, which sparked her interest in law enforcement. This interest quickly developed into a passion, and when she graduated from high school, she immediately accepted a position at the Polk County Sheriff's Office. Deputy Chief Betty Holland's career goals include becoming Chief of Police with the City of Kissimmee Police Department and continuing to build relationships with the community. She is passionate about lowering crime rates with innovative new deterrent measures, holding public servants to higher standards and expectations, and creating more open lines of communication between officers and civilians. Her actions regarding these objectives remain a consistent measure of her interest in the betterment of the field of law enforcement. For this and more, Deputy Chief Betty Holland, we honor you. In honor of Women's History Month, I would like to recognize Miss Cindy Lewis. Cindy Lewis has dedicated her nearly 33-year career at the Kissimmee Osceola County Chamber of Commerce to serving the business community of Osceola County. A native Floridian, Cindy was born in DeLand, Florida, as the second daughter of Johnny and Annette Wimberly. She has called Central Florida her home for her entire life, and is a proud graduate of Osceola High School's class of 1980. Cindy began her career with the Kissimmee Osceola County Chamber of Commerce as an administrative assistant in 1989. She was promoted to office manager in 1994 and executive vice president in 2008. In her time at the Chamber, Cindy was recognized as Chamber Professional of the Year in 2017 by the Florida Association of Chamber Professionals. She received her certification as a Florida Certified Chamber Professional and is currently in her 4th year at the Institute of Organization Management, a professional development program of the U.S. Chamber Foundation, from which she will graduate in June of this year with the IOM certification. During her tenure at the Kissimmee Osceola Chamber, the Chamber has been recognized for the Florida Association Chamber Professionals as Chamber of the Year in 2001, 2017, and 2021. Cindy is also a graduate of Leadership Osceola. Cindy has been married to Troy Lewis, the love of her life, for 32 years. Cindy and Troy own a ranch in Claremont, Florida, filled with cattle, donkeys, chickens, cats, and 2 spoiled dogs who are their pride and joy. When she is not working or ranching, she enjoys spending time with her husband boating, enjoying outdoor activities, learning new recipes, vacationing in the Florida Keys, and spending time with her family and friends. For this and more, Miss Cindy Lewis, we honor you. In honor of Women's History Month, I would like to recognize Doris Moore Bailey. Miss Doris Moore Bailey's innovative marketing skills for a national youth organization inspired her to develop middle school and teen mom initiatives in 4 Florida counties and 24 schools to provide services for 1,000 students yearly. An experienced adjunct professor and YMCA program director, she believes that no one achieves a successful life without the influence of positive mentoring. Twice appointed by Florida's Governor Lawton Chiles to the Peace River Basin Board of the Southwest Florida Water Management District, she participated in flyovers of the basin's 105-mile Peace River, Florida's Manatee River, that flows into the Gulf of Mexico to Tampa Bay, Florida's largest storage facility with 1,147-acre New Wells gypstack in Polk County. She established the African American Chamber of Commerce of Polk County, Inc., the African American Historical Museum of Lakeland, reestablished the Polk County Democratic Black Caucus, organized Polk County USCT and Buffalo Soldiers reenactors, and is the founder of Friends of Cathay Williams organization. She is also the only female Buffalo soldier and advocates for the rights of voters to access to the ballot box. Through her work, she strives to enhance community resources. In 2022, she organized the African American Historical Museum of Lakeland, Equal Justice Initiative Lynching Community Remembrance Project, and Polk County's first commemoration of the 56th anniversary of Selma Bridge Crossing's Jubilee Unity March. She is a Polk County trailblazer spanning 30 years in talk radio as an executive producer and host of Our Voices. Moore Bailey and her husband of 44 years are parents of 2 adult children and grandparents to 5 grandsons. In 1992, she organized Florida's first Juneteenth observance. She's a member of the New Bethel AME Church, a NAACP Gold Life member, and a chartered member of the past president of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Inc. chapter in Lakeland. She also authored anthologies, Voices of Unsung Immortal Mothers and Sons of Immortal Mothers. For this and more, Miss Doris Moore Bailey, we honor you. In honor of Women's History Month, I would like to recognize Dr. Lynn Marshall. Dr. Lynn Marshall's journey in public health began when she worked as an education and training coordinator for Healthy Start Coalition. During that time, she joined the Florida Healthy Babies Committee and led a subcommittee that consisted of the following partners: Lakeland Regional Health Hospital, the Florida Department of Health, Healthy Start Coalition, Sunshine Health, and Spirit Life Ministries. In 2019, Dr. Marshall and a handful of community partners hosted the first Melanin Families Matter community event at Lakeland Regional Health Carol Jenkins Barnett Pavilion for Women and Children. In August of 2019, Dr. Marshall took the initiative to incorporate and serve as the president of Melanin Families Matter. She has received proclamations on behalf of Melanin Families Matter from the Polk County Board of Commissioners, Winter Haven Chain of Lakes Mayor Bradley T. Dantzler, and the City of Lakeland Mayor Bill Mutz. These government officers have recognized and publicly declared the month of March to be Melanin Families Matter Month. Dr. Marshall continues to host annual Melanin Families Matter health panels and community events that are open to the public at no cost. In addition to providing education to the Polk County community, Dr. Marshall also spearheads a community distribution day. Each year, it is during this time when care packages, educational materials, clothing, and food, and play items for babies and children are provided to families in need at no cost. As a community advocate, Dr. Marshall has served as a guest speaker on the following platforms: 100 National Coalition of Black Women, Polk State College Women's History Month panel discussion, the Empowered Woman, Our Voices Live radio broadcast, and more. Dr. Marshall is the wife of Dr. Jarvis L. Marshall, and together they have 2 beautiful daughters. For this and more, Dr. Lynn Marshall, we honor you. In honor of Women's History Month, I would like to recognize Laudy Campo. Laudy Campo was born and raised in Morovis, Puerto Rico. Through a 25-year professional trajectory in communications, government, and nonprofits, she continues to build organizations, create partnerships, and implement innovative outreach and services for the community. Her career started in the Puerto Rico Senate as a communications specialist. She then became an English teacher and later gained valuable experience in federal grant management in the private sector. As a public relations director for the Vega Alta city, her most notable contribution became a radio program to connect the community with the local government. In 2011, she moved with her family to Orlando, where she has been a noteworthy player in Hispanic relations in Central Florida. As a Spanish language teacher, she acquired valuable insight into the education system. Her passion for community work reignited at the Orange County Property Appraiser and the City of Orlando's District 2 office, a sector rich in diversity and community pride, where she helped people of different nationalities. One of the most significant achievements became her work on the Trust Act policy, which has approved unanimously by the Orlando City Council and helps non-citizens who are victims of crime. In 2019, Laudy was named Deputy Director for the Hispanic Federation, Florida, the nation's premier Latino nonprofit. She directed the census, voter registration, and COVID-19 media campaigns during the pandemic. In 2021, she became HF Florida's State Director. She expanded services and spearheaded a massive effort to vaccinate 13,000 individuals and educate more than 1 million Floridians on vaccines. She foresaw a pandemic aftershock and provided $1 million in financial aid to local nonprofits. Laudy continues to forge partnerships and advocate for affordable housing, immigration, environmental justice, and fair districting. Most recently, she has been recognized by the 2021 Tech Innovadores for her work in digital inclusion. For this and more, Ms. Senora Laudy Campo, we honor you. In honor of Women's History Month, I would like to recognize Sarah Johnston. Sarah Johnston serves as the Vice President of Development of the Boys and Girls Club of Central Florida. She began her career in the development field in 2002 after graduating from the University of Central Florida. Her goal has always been to obtain a leadership position that utilizes and challenges her abilities to maximize results, build strong relationships, and honor her commitment to excellence, innovation, and community. She is a mission-driven professional with over 20 years of experience in building and sustaining excellent investor relationships with a measurable track record of success. Through her experience, she has demonstrated expertise in creating philanthropic cultures by utilizing a strategic, collaborative, data-driven, and results-oriented mindset. In her eyes, her team's responsibility is to serve as a connector for individuals in the community and their passion for investing in the future of children of promise. Sarah's favorite part of her role in building bridges with investors and sharing the potential impact they can have through the stories of club members she serves. She believes there is nothing more important than telling a child you believe in them and that regardless of their zip code or the economic status of their family, they deserve a chance to realize their dreams. In her service to the community, Sarah raised over $25 million in hope and opportunity. Ultimately, she is driven every day by the bravery of the club members she serves, who face and have overcome unimaginable obstacles, as well as the success they achieve through mentors and club programming. For her, being able to watch a club member be the first in their family to walk across a stage to receive a high school diploma and seeing the pride light up in their eyes keeps her believing that every day is an opportunity to be great. For this and more, Miss Sarah Johnston, we honor you. In honor of Women's History Month, I would like to recognize Yolanda Bell. Miss Yolanda Bell serves as the Associate Dean for the Student Services at Polk State College, where she listens to, learns from, and encourages people from all walks of life to achieve their dreams. Bell is a strong leader who does not seek the spotlight and prefers to work in the background, providing guidance and support that fosters student success. Born and raised in Bartow, Florida, Bell was a teen parent who overcame obstacles to achieve her diploma and provide for her family. Her perseverance resulted in her achievement of an associate degree from Polk Community College, a bachelor's degree from Warner University, and a master's degree from Webster University, all while raising 2 sons. She first served Polk County Public Schools, followed by positions with the Florida Department of Children and Families, and finally Polk State College. She was the first in her family to achieve a college diploma, providing her with an understanding of the challenges that students of color and first-generation in-college students face as they navigate higher education. She is a leader on campus, serving as an advisor to the Black Student Union, a founder of Sisters, strong, independent sisters that encourage respect and survive, and a mentor for Polk State basketball and STEM club students. She also invests time as a member of the organizing committee for the City of Winter Haven Juneteenth celebration, serving on the City of Winter Haven's Martin Luther King Committee, volunteering as the Neighborhood Service Center, and participating in Lift Lakeland to improve race relations and expand economic, education, and civic involvement. Bell lives Maya Angelou's quote, "People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel," as she plays an important role in supporting students and celebrating their achievements. For this and more, Miss Yolanda Bell, we honor you. And Madam Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Pursuant to Section 11B of House Resolution 188, the House stands adjourned until 1 p.m. on Monday, March 21st, 2022.